Hello, and welcome to the Social Studies mini lesson. Some of you may be watching on YouTube, some of you may be listening on a podcast, and some of you may be subscribed to my Substack. Whichever way you got here, I'm happy you are here. 3 quick housekeeping items we will go over each time. Number 1, be prepared. If you are listening on the podcast, grab a notebook so you can take notes. If you are watching the stream, you can take notes or even screenshots. Number 2, pay attention. These mini lessons are meant to be just that, mini. They are not long and drawn out, so put the other devices away and pay attention to the lesson we are about to go over. If you are a paid subscriber to the Substack, you can ask any questions about today's lesson in the chat and submit your review answers in there as well. Number 3, this is quite possibly the most important message. You are the captain of your own learning. You only get out what you put into your education, but no one can ever take your learning away from you. Showcase your knowledge on this subject by completing the practice questions at the end. And as always, enjoy today's mini lesson. Today's lesson is about apartheid in South Africa. Our social studies mini lesson objectives for today. We are going to define apartheid, talk about the history of apartheid, discuss British control of South Africa, and Nelson Mandela. I have 3 questions up on the screen today that we're going to answer. Number 1, what is apartheid? Apartheid is a system of institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination in South Africa between 1948 and 1991. Does this system still exist? The answer is no. Who is credited with helping end apartheid? His name, Nelson Mandela. A little history of South Africa. European interest in South Africa grew due to its strategic location as a trade route, particularly around the Cape of Good Hope. This area was crucial for global trade between Europe and India. In 1652, the Dutch established a supply station at the Cape of Good Hope, marking the beginning of their involvement in the region. The Dutch settlers, known as the Boers or Afrikaners, played a key role in shaping South Africa's early history. In 1652, the Dutch established a supply station at the Cape of Good Hope, a strategic location for trade between Europe and India. This settlement was intended to support Dutch ships traveling along the African coast, offering fresh supplies like food and water. Over time, it grew into a permanent colony, marking the beginning of Dutch influence in South Africa. The Dutch presence at the Cape played a significant role in shaping the region's history and its connection to global trade. Here's a trivia question for you. Do you know what Boers stands for? The British in South Africa. The Boers were also the farmers. The British seized the Cape Colony from the Dutch at the end of the 18th century. When we think about that, what do you think that this caused? The Boers created 2 separate republics. Relations between the British government and the 2 republics were already strained when 2 major discoveries ultimately led to a war between Brits and Afrikaners. What were those 2 discoveries? Here's a hint. Many of these precious stones still come from this area. If you guessed diamonds and gold, you are correct. Diamonds were found at Kimberley in 1867 near the confluence of the Orange and Vaal rivers, and large gold deposits were detected in the Transvaal 19 years later. People flooded the areas to work and or seek their fortunes. British control of South Africa. The Anglo-Boer Wars, fought in 1880 to 1881 and 1899 to 1902, were pivotal conflicts that determined the control of South Africa. By the end of the wars, Britain had gained control over both the Boer republics. These territories, along with British's Britain's other colonies in the Cape and Natal regions would soon unite to form the Union of South Africa. While it became a self governing dominion of the British Empire, the Union excluded the natives from full participation in its governance. The Anglo Boer Wars in South Africa led to British control over the Boer republics. Britain gained control of the former Boer republics of the Transvaal and the Orange Free State, the formation of the Union of South Africa. The British colonies of the Cape, Natal, and Boer republics united in 1910 to form the Union of South Africa, a self governing dominion of the British Empire, and exclusion of Black South Africans from political power. The Union of South Africa established a political system that denied voting rights and political participation to the majority of Black South Africans, reinforcing racial segregation. The system of racial segregation, or apartheid, was a policy of institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination in South Africa, enforcing the separation of different racial groups in all areas of public life, including housing, education, and healthcare. There was political and social oppression. Under apartheid, non white South Africans were denied basic political rights, including the right to vote, and were subjected to laws that restricted their movements, employment, and social interactions. It was legally enforced by the government. Apartheid laws were enacted by the National Party government, which ruled from 1948 to 1994 and were strictly enforced by the state, resulting in widespread human rights abuses and inequality. The homelands. During apartheid in South Africa, the Black majority was forcibly relocated to homelands areas that resembled Indian reservations in the United States. These homelands were often underdeveloped, lacking basic services like plumbing and electricity. Black South Africans were stripped of their citizenship and no longer considered citizens of South Africa. Instead, they were made citizens of the independent homelands, further separating them from the country's political and social systems. My question on the screen says, were they allowed to vote? And the answer is no. You may recognize this man and may know what he is known for. This is Nelson Mandela. He was a South African activist and the country's first Black president. Known globally for his efforts to end apartheid and his advocacy for human rights, a member of the African National Congress, or ANC, since the 1940s, Mandela led both peaceful protests and armed resistance against the oppressive rule of the white minority in racially divided South Africa. His activism led to his imprisonment for nearly 30 years, making him a symbol of the anti-apartheid movement, both in South Africa and worldwide. After his release in 1990, Mandela played a key role in dismantling apartheid and in 1994 became South Africa's first Black president. He established a multi-ethnic government to guide the nation through its transition. After retiring from politics in 1999, Mandela continued to be a strong advocate for peace and social justice until his death in 2013 at the age of 95. A reminder, paid subscribers can submit the answers to the practice work and their questions into the chat in Substack. Here are our 3 questions for today. Number 1, what is a similar comparison for the homelands here in the United States? Number 2, were Blacks in South Africa allowed to vote during apartheid? Number 3, when did apartheid end? Please be sure to submit your practice work into the chat, and I hope to see you all again next week. Have a great one.